What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another highly combustible reaction. We're going to be jumping in the next one on our Geography Now journey. Geography Now, Australia. Now, I have been told that this was one of the earlier ones that they did. So, that they've kind of evolved over as they've gone along. People just wanted to give me a heads up. I would never fault them for anything that they did, honestly, because they're doing things that nobody else is doing. Giving us full on, down to the nice ass details sometimes, rundowns of countries with full of information that I had no idea about. So any kind of information that I can get in any kind of way, hey, that's information that makes me more knowledgeable, more worldly, more understanding of other people. So let's jump in. Let's check it out together. Let's see what we got. Let's roll. If you guys enjoy it, definitely go over, show Geography Now some love. You already know we love them. We're hitting the like button. Let's go.
All right, everybody, let's just all get it off of our chests. Koalas and kangaroos, boomerangs, didgeridoos, Sydney, Melbourne, Uluru, crocodiles, cockadoos, everything that will kill you, shrimp on Barbies, that's not true, that Vegemite stuff that tastes.
That stuff. We'll have a story if that comes up, the Vegemite thing.
Crocodiles, cockadoos, everything that will kill you, shrimp on Barbies, that's not true, that Vegemite stuff that tastes like poo, coral reefs and platypuses, platypi. Platypus. All right, now let's actually learn about the freaking country.
All right, since he didn't talk about the Vegemite, that stuff. All right, let me tell you where I was introduced to it at. I used to put peanut butter on my waffles in Afghanistan on deployment. Go every day, put some peanut butter on the waffle, eat it. When we ran out of peanut butter, oh, this is Nutella stuff. I didn't know what that was. I tried it like chocolate. That's just pretty good. We ran out of peanut butter and Nutella, and I seen this Vegemite stuff, and I said, oh, that must be like that Nutella stuff. And I put it on my waffle and filled the pockets on the waffle of it and took a bite. And that's when I learned that I will never, ever eat Vegemite again. It will never come near my lips. I don't know how you do it. I don't give a damn how thin of a layer it is on your toast. Nothing could make that. I don't even know who the first person that was like, yeah, you know what? Let me go ahead and taste this yeast concoction over here. No, I'm not.
It's time to learn geography.
No!
Hey everybody, I'm your host Paul Barbado. Today's gonna be Australia. You know the drill, let's dissect the flag.
We're gonna leave, I guess we'll leave them off.
The Australian flag has a blue field with a Union Jack on the upper hoist corner to represent that it was a former colony and a current Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, with a large star under it representing the Commonwealth, and the 5 stars on the right, the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Crucis, to the right representing the Southern Cross constellation. Alright, that was fun. Now let's discuss about the borders. Now, obviously, as an island nation, or rather large one, but still an island, Australia doesn't have any borders with other nations, but that doesn't mean that Australia doesn't have some rather intriguing parameters. The country divides itself up in a rather intriguing way. Like the US, Australia has states, not provinces. There is a difference. 6 of them, and each one kind of has their own little flair and quirks, like Tasmania, known for being crazy. Where things get a little interesting, though, are the territories. Australia has 3 domestic internal territories and 6 overseas territories. Technically 7 if you include the Australian Antarctic territory, even though the Antarctic Treaty kind of bans anybody from claiming Antarctic soil as their own, which we will find out in future episodes that a lot of countries do a wonderful job at ignoring. The 3 internal territories are Northern
A lot of countries all own a little piece of Antarctica.
Territory, Capital Territory, which is basically just the capital city of Canberra and some extra space around it, and the confusing little tyke Jervis Bay Territory. Jervis Bay was bought and developed to give the inland capital Canberra access to the sea, and eventually Jervis Bay split from the capital. However, it's still counted as part of the capital in elections. It's a little confusing, even though it really doesn't have much going for it, except for a small navy base and beaches that it kind of took from other neighboring towns. The most dramatic border area, though, would have to be the middle of Australia. For years, this slab of land didn't exactly quite know how to distinguish itself and has gone through 4 transitions in the past century. First, it was all South Australia, which didn't quite make sense because parts of it touched the northern part.
That was going to be the most confusing thing. Central Australia. That would make sense.
Parts of Australia. So it split into 2, 1 state and 1 territory. Then for 4 years, it became South Australia and 2 territories, the new one being called Central Australian Territory. Then finally it changed its mind and went back to being Northern Territory. Central Australia is kind of like your girlfriend at a restaurant. What do you want?
Anything.
What do you want? It's not that simple! Finally, we reach the overseas territories. Although Australia has over 8,000 islands under its sovereignty, 6 of these islands operate as distinct territories, some of of which sustain themselves with permanent populations.
8,000 islands. 8,000. That's a 000.
More in Cartier, the Cocos or Keelings Islands, Coral Sea Islands, the Heard and McDonald Islands, and the popular holiday spot, Norfolk Island, and the pleasant Christmas Island that gets attacked by huge coconut crabs every year. Finally, Australia is home to arguably the most micronations in the world. Places like the Principality of Wye, Rainbow Creek, the Empire of Atlantium, and more. These nations were developed by either small groups of people or a single person because they were doing things like protesting taxes and wanted to claim autonomy, or they were just kind of bored and decided to amuse themselves. But still, hey, they tried. All right, now let's talk about
Can't blame them for trying.
Shall we? Okay, not all of Australia is a desert, okay? Only about 35%. Okay, so besides Antarctica, Australia is the driest continent on the planet, which explains why, yes, 85% of the population lives along the edges of the country.
You want to live near the water, baby.
Within 50 kilometers of the coast. Nonetheless, a lot of places, specifically around the coasts, actually have very temperate and even tropical landscapes. By the north, you find tropical zones and wetlands and rainforests. By the far edges on the east and west, you can find subtropical zones with lighter forests and plains. A little bit inland, close to the interior, you find grasslands and flat stretches of semi-arid terrain. In the southeast by Sydney, you find temperate, cooler, arid land with semi-tropical, yet slightly dry areas with an abundance of trees and plants. Then, of course, you have Tasmania, which is on a completely different level of green. Then we reach the deep interior where we hit the Great Deserts like the Great Victoria and the Great Sandy Deserts. This area is famously known as the Outback. The Outback is essentially the area of Australia with long open stretches of red and orange desert that lays out beyond the horizon with few sparse populations of people that can be found anywhere. It has a dry, rocky, rugged terrain that everybody assumes is teeming with a variety of poisonous insects and reptiles, and, well, I mean, it kind of is.
I'm just saying, we didn't just assume it. Everything wants to kill you.
That strange lake that is mysteriously naturally pink for some strange reason that baffles scientists. Now, if there's one thing that really epitomizes Australia,
it really bothers me that there's some things that still baffle scientists, like why water is pink. That bothers me. Why are we still being baffled by things on Earth, but we're trying to reach out to the farthest edges of the galaxy?
It would have to be its world-renowned beaches and coasts. People flock from all over the world just to enjoy the beautiful, pristine atmosphere of a real, authentic Australian beach.
That's because those people are crazy. Not a chance. Saltwater crocodiles on one side, great whites all around. I'm not swimming in a great white cereal bowl. I would much rather take my chances with them smaller sharks on the other side. Like, no. Hell no. I'm not doing it in California. I'm not doing no scuba diving in Australia. Nowhere that anybody has seen the man in the gray suit smiling at him. Not a chance. I might go to South Africa and look at one from a cage. But you're not going to get me to go swimming on the beaches in Australia. Even though I watched that show.
Just remember to put on your sunscreen though. Australians actually kind of have a joke where they can tell who the ignorant tourists are. It's usually the ones who think they'll be totally fine sitting out in the sun for more than 20 minutes. Skin cancer rates are actually exceptionally high in Australia, and the population has acknowledged the precautions that they need to take.
It's
now, we all know that
sunscreen.
Australia is home to some of the most unique and curiously distinct animal species in the world not found anywhere else. However, Australia is also known as the home of many feral species.
Yeah, wild-ass animals that will kill you.
That were brought over to the land from areas mostly in Europe, and over the course of nearly 1.5 centuries have bred and spread like wildfire all over the country. Animals like the European rabbit, red fox, water buffaloes, goats, pigs, even camels, and worst of all, the famous cane toad. They've all gone wild and have cost the Australian government billions of dollars in environmental damages and maintenance. Yeah, I don't really know how to transition into the demographics from this part, so...
Here's demographics. I love it.
Today, Australia has a population of about 23 million people. Now, to many outsiders, Australia is kind of known as the place where the British sent their prisoners. First of all, that's rude. Second of all, that's only, kind of half true. Yes, during the early years of Australia's colonization from the UK, droves of convicts were sent to penal colonies in Botany Bay, which is now in present-day Sydney. Over 165,000 convicts, about 25,000 of which were women, were sent over the course of 80 years. Although the British weren't the first ones to discover Australia, it was actually the Dutch. As they came, they named the land New Holland and the adjacent island next door, New Zealand, after the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands. However, as we'll soon discover, the Dutch were really good at discovering places, but kind of not so good at
holding on to them
and maintaining those places for themselves. However, most of Australia's population came from natural colonization from British non-convict nationals. Some would argue that Australia was kind of like the UK's version of Operation Backup Plan in case of America goes crazy. After the American Revolution, the UK tried to compensate for lost colonies by re-establishing new ones, and Australia was hot on the list. About 85% of the population is European. Asians make up the next largest minority of about 12%, mostly coming from China and India and other Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. And by the way, yes, Australia does have black people, not many, but before the Federation began, Africans, mostly from sub-Saharan countries like South Africa, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, and Sudan, have historically resided in Australia. It wasn't until the 60s when African assistance programs allowed many Africans to study and eventually move to Australia. Today, they make up about 1% of the population. One demographic of people that commonly gets overlooked, though, would have to be the native Australians, commonly known as the Aborigines, which make up about 3% of the population. Aborigines are a very unique and distinct people group that come from hundreds of different tribes, each with their own language and dialect, spread throughout the north, south, and central regions. Today, Aboriginal rights are a huge hot-button topic in Australian legislation, and about 22% of the land of northern Australia is Aboriginal-owned. In 2013, Aboriginal groups actually banded together and decided to kind of make their own little state called the Murruwarri Republic, independent from Australia. The Australian government, though, doesn't really recognize this claim and just kind of brushes it off with a meh, as long as you don't cause a civil war attitude. Well, as you can see, a lot of people have come to live in Australia, but now let's see how Australia interacts with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Australia is, let's just put it very simply, a very popular country. If this was high school, Australia would be on the top of the social ladder, hands down. Everybody knows something about Australia.
It's true.
When it comes to friends, though, Australia not only goes for the cool kids, but also the strategic ones. Of course, Australia gets along with many of its Asian neighbor nations, specifically China and India, as large numbers of people from those nations live in Australia, and they do great business with them as well. Australia gets along pretty well with the islands of Oceania, except Fiji. In 2006, Australia refused to back up a military coup that overthrew the government in Fiji, and since then, things have been a little weird between the two countries. In terms of their best friends, though, of course, New Zealand would have to rank in the top level, and they are basically like siblings that share very similar culture, language, and histories as former colonies, whereas the UK also has a high priority on Australia's entourage as they make up the largest demographic of people ethnically and as migrants in the country. But finally, we reach the USA. The USA and Australia kind of have a little crush on each other. Australia is always there to back up the US in times when allies are necessary, and the US, well, I mean, we Americans, we just love Australians. We love their accents. We love their culture. We love their accents.
We love Crocodile Dundee.
Australian attitude, and we love their sexy, sexy accents.
Yes.
Almost any Australian that comes to the U.S. is immediately loved and welcome, even if they are slightly sociopathic. One sentence with that accent, and we are smitten.
Yes.
We love you, Australia.
We do.
In conclusion, Australia is just everybody loves Australia. Stay tuned. Austria is coming up next.
Not the same, by the way. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna let these credits roll, so they definitely go to all the right people. I would say it's just as good as any of the other geography nows, flowing with information that we definitely did not know. I would still go. I would go to Australia. I would take a trip. It's the place that I definitely would like to see. I'd like to see the Sydney Opera House, things like that. I'd like to go to all of the little touristy places. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go swimming. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go hiking through the middle of the outback like some of these people. I'm not there for walkabout. I'm not there to run into no drop bears. Yes, I know they don't really exist, but I have heard of them. Seriously, though, Australia, it seems like one of the most maybe wild countries next to Africa. Sri Lanka, right around that area. It's real wild, real still. There's real animals wandering around. That kind of thing. Like, very, very cool to me. A place that I would definitely like to see. I'd love to see a wild kangaroo doing this thing, hopping across whatever land it wants to hop across. Like, that's all new and exciting. But at the same time, it's terrifying. Because everybody that you meet says huntsman spiders. Giant ass huntsman spiders. So with the crocodiles. All of this stuff there's a lot of things that just want to kill you in Australia. And some of the snakes and venom and it's a toss-up. It's like playing Russian roulette. I'm not sure I want to play, but I do want to visit, at least visit. But I might not be going and doing a lot of crazy stuff. Just like, hey, let's have some tea or something. If you guys enjoyed it, definitely get over. Show Geography now some love. We're already subbed up. We already hit the like button. You should too. It's down there inside the description. Hit the like button here if you liked it. The dislike button if you disliked it. Check out the other video up there. One of these guys up here. Until the next one, Highly Combustible. You guys be happy, healthy, safe. Love you to the moon and back. Peace.